Wonderful. Okay. So if I haven't had the opportunity to meet you in person, my name is Yana Saylor, and I'm the artistic director of the Allegra Chamber Orchestra, which is the host organization for Composer Inc. And we're thrilled to have all of you with us today. You're a wonderful company, very distinguished company. We have some of our wonderful fellows here, Snow, Lavinia, and Kalason, and some of our applicants, Cameron, and some of our wonderful mentors, Rodney, and our presenter today, Dorothy Chang. And I'm currently coming to you from the traditional territories of the Treaty 7 Nations and Métis Region 3, otherwise known as Calgary. And so the point of these professional development workshops that we're offering over the next couple of months is to connect you with the community, the resources, and the people that can kind of take you to the next level, help you promote your works, have different resources in order to be visible, etc. And a lot of those focus on what happens after composition once you've got the piece written. But we thought we'd take this opportunity today to kind of dive into what happens maybe perhaps before you even start composing, to kind of address some of those those inner workings, possibly your own obstacles and challenges, and your own process and thinking about your process. And I can't think of a better guide to take us through this than the wonderful Dorothy Chang. Wonderful, a critically acclaimed composer, has written over 70 works for various configurations and have been performed by orchestras and ensembles around the world to wonderful reception. Personally, I've had the privilege of performing her works both as a violinist and conductor on several occasions, and that was just a wonderfully rewarding and enriching experience. And Dorothy is currently a professor of composition at the University of British Columbia, among many other things. I'm just going to pop her website in the chat so that you can read up on more of her many accomplishments. But I will hop off and pass it over to you, Dorothy.
Great. Thank you, Jan, and thanks for that wonderful introduction. And I forgot to ask you ahead of time if you could give me share screen ability because we'll be doing a little bit with the whiteboard. Um,
Great.
so the official topic today is finding your authentic voice, but that is a very huge, scary, and ambiguous topic. So I think, yeah, we will talk a bit about that, but I think it's always great when there is a program like this to have a session where composers can just talk shop. It's one of the things we very or too rarely do because often the times we're just working in our boxes and in isolation. And if we were interacting, often it's collaborating with performers. And there's really not too many opportunities for composers just to talk to other composers. So I would love it if everybody can participate today. We're a small enough group. I think we can go around the Zoom room. And I'm hoping to hear from all of you. So along those lines, I had a very nice intro, and you all know each other, I gather by now, but I don't know everybody here. So could we take turns and just tell me who you are, where you are, a bit about what you do as a composer slash musician, um, and then add on as an icebreaker your earliest or your most favorite musical memory? Okay, so Snow, you're right next to me on my screen, so I'm gonna have you go next.
So hi, I'm Snow, and I'm currently in Vancouver, and I'm doing my composition bachelor degrees in UBC, and I, what else should I say? I like to work with graphic and art and multimedia elements with composition and as well as like electronic and yeah. And one of the what is the last
Either your earliest musical memory or one of your favorite musical memories, just something that's very impactful to you.
Mm, one of my favorite musical memories. I guess it's like when I was little and I have like this little piano keyboard that I always like play around on it. And it brought me a lot of fun. I guess that would be one. Yeah.
Okay, great,
Mm.
thank you. And am I pronouncing this correctly? Because I didn't catch it when Yana said it. Kalazen? Is that correct?
Clayson, yeah, that's
Kalazen?
pretty much it. Yeah.
All
Um,
right.
yeah, hi. So great to connect with you, meet with you over Zoom, Dorothy. And my name is Clayson Clay Chelvin. I'm based in Toronto, musician and composer, and a lot of my work sort of in the chamber music space kind of deals with like questions around translation and transference. And I work across different mediums as well, so theater and film and dance, and have been in those kind of spaces as well. Um, yeah, in terms of earliest memory, one that comes to mind is there was a film called Artificial Intelligence, I think back in 2000 or 2001, which was pretty weird to watch as a kid because so much of it just was like over my head. But there was like this really strange sequence of the main character sort of arriving in this metropolis-like city, and the music by John Williams was just like this very John Adams-esque, which I didn't know at the time, but now no, now very like this kind of really cool textural music at that time, and I was just like, whoa. It was like one of the first times I was like actually noticing music in movies, and sort of stumbled onto like even actively seeking that out. I guess that's something that comes to mind.
Great, thank you. Sounds like a real aha moment. Yeah. Lavinia?
Hi, Dorothy. It is really an honor to meet you. And I am in Lethbridge, Alberta. I work at the University of Lethbridge Conservatory of Music, and I teach creative music classes to like about 35 community members. And I don't know, I guess my compositional background, I write a lot of choral music, and I'm kind of excited to have these opportunities to expand that. My earliest memories, that's what my this project is really addressing, is the that I remember like creating music with like maybe non-musical elements from a very early age, like having, my parents were farmers, and so like sitting in the tractor and singing along with that, like the drone of the motor, and the like different kind of rhythmic elements with machinery, that sort of thing. So my family's not really, they wouldn't consider themselves musicians, but they're very musical. And I grew up like singing that 4-part harmony. And I think like my very earliest memory is coming down and hearing my mother playing the organ, um, and sitting on her lap and watching her feet move. So um, that's, yeah, it's nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. Rodney, did you want to join in?
Sure. I'm Rodney Sharman. I live on Coast Seychelles territory in Vancouver as well. I'm a composer mentor in residence with the Victoria Symphony Orchestra. I also work in dance and opera and music theater regularly and write monodramas in addition to concert music and cabaret music. My earliest memories for music. Well, I think, Lavinia, this is a common prairie experience that my mother had a beautiful alto voice and played the piano, and my sister played piano. Um, and we had neighbors, and one who played the saxophone, one who played the accordion. The saxophone player was always coming over to the house and saying, "Can Evie come out to play?" Meaning my mother. And we would have house music in the basement. So I know the words to pretty much every musical and old standard written between about 1920 and 1965, maybe 68. So my earliest and some of my nicest memories are from that. Eventually, when I played musical instruments, I used to play along with my clarinet, with the saxophone guy, and so on. But it was a lot of singing. Oh, oh yes, and I've forgotten. I was a choir boy. I was a boy soprano in the Anglican Church. And this is one of my early sort of trauma memories, in fact, was that the choir director was not there one day. And so it was led by the organist, who kept asking me to sing without vibrato. And I was 5 years old, maybe 4. And I didn't know what the word vibrato meant. I just sang with vibrato because that's how I sang as a little boy. And she hit me, slapped me for singing. Stop. So there's classical music for you.
Oh no, that's terrible.
I had forgotten that.
I'm
Yeah.
glad you were able to overcome that and become a
Ah,
musician regardless.
no, I loved singing. I kept going, but no, I was never fond of her.
I don't blame you. My goodness. Well, thank you.
Well, think of all the kids my age who had their hands hit with rulers, right?
Yes, yes, that is
You know,
true.
when they were learning piano.
That's true. Yeah. Or learning anything in the classroom, right?
Did nobody hit you when you were learning the violin? Violin doesn't seem like an instrument that you get hit with.
I didn't learn violin. I was a pianist.
Ah, okay.
No, and
Sorry,
I wasn't
sorry. I
hit.
thought piano
I
I
wasn't
was.
hit, but I did have an old like Russian teacher who would lecture me very sternly and make me cry. So, anyways, that's another story. Yeah, you want to jump in? Just we
Oh,
share your
sure.
family.
And Michelle, just want to say a quick hi to Michelle. Hi, Michelle. We're just jumping in and talking about our earliest kind of musical memories. If you just jump.
Oh, that's awesome. Yes, thank you. So I'm sorry I'm late. I'm in the car, so I'm not going to put my video on because I'm dropping my daughter at something, but I'm loving to hear everything. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Wonderful. And just FYI, Dorothy, just to make sure you can do all the things you need to do, I made you the host. So you have those capabilities. Yeah, so I trained as a violinist and then later a conductor. But my earliest memory and probably most influential memory was for a very short time, my family relocated to Toronto. And when I was 3 years old, my mom took me to see Sir Andrew Davis conduct a Carnival of the Animals at the TSO. And I was very, very tiny. And she, had just in her eagerness to make sure I had a great experience, she bought, nice seats up right close to the stage. And I was completely enthralled with the performance. Sir Andrew came out and conducted on the podium dressed as a lion, which was fascinating. And then also there was the violins. Like they had little like little chicken decorations on their chairs and eggs and things, which and my mom took me home and said, okay, what was your favorite instrument? And really the only instrument I could see was the violins and the chicken eggs. And the only two things I could see was the violin and the conductor. So maybe that was like some, foreshadowing of what I was going to do. But I was utterly enthralled with that whole experience. And I still remember little tiny snippets from that come back. And I guess that just kind of started my love affair with the orchestra in general and creativity and creating all together. So yeah.
Thank you. I love that. Yeah, great. And Cameron, did you want to share?
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me all right? Okay. Yeah, I'm Cameron Esquega. I'm from Thunder Bay, Ontario, and I'm only in high school, so I don't really have, I'm not too sure what I want to do as a composer. But my favorite musical memory so far has been playing for a school musical of mine. It wasn't anything classical. We were playing ABBA, but it was still a lot of fun being around musicians and getting that experience.
Thank you. And Michelle, I know you might be driving, so I don't know if you want to chime in or not, but go ahead if you
I,
want.
yeah, I've parked here, so thank you.
Okay.
And we're sharing our earliest musical memory. Is that what we're sharing?
Yeah.
Sure. I guess for me, to be honest, it would be, and I was just listening to it today. We moved my father into a senior's home from his family home just last year, and I have all his records. So as a little kid, we're immigrants from South Asia, from India. But he loved music. He never had an education in it. Both my parents did. But he loved music and he just had tastes that was wide and far ranging, and it was represented in this record collection he had. One of his pride and joys was his record player, which I have in my home. And there was a Mozart record. It was Clara Haskell, I think, on piano and violin. Mozart violin and piano duo. So could have been trios. I can't remember, but I don't know. He played it all the time Saturday mornings. And sure enough, I was playing it this morning, and it brings back just so many childhood memories. There was something so, foreign and also just beautiful and alive about the music, graceful, playful, all the things that Mozart are. And I don't know, it was the quality of that recording. But so earliest memories for me would be just listening a lot, sitting around the record player, because that was the kind of thing you looked at the cover, you looked at the back, you studied all the words on the back, you looked at the pictures, and you imagined so much. So I really feel like so much of that imaginative sonic world started listening to records. He loved Harry Belafonte as well, and a wide, and madrigals, and just a wide variety of stuff, Ravi Shankar. And so I just absorbed, and I loved that, and I still do. And so it brings me back to childhood, actually, when I do that periodically. I guess that's what I'll share.
Thank you. Thanks so much. That's beautiful. Okay, so this is not just an icebreaker. This is really part of what I wanted to get to in terms of developing your voice as a composer, because if I look at my own journey, I don't think I can really isolate a single early memory. Everything is just one big blur of activity. When I think about my earliest days, I'm the youngest of three, typical immigrant family. Everybody has to learn piano and violin. I was the rebel and I learned piano and clarinet. But I was always surrounded by music when I was growing up. At least my parents are not musicians. So that's an early memory. And then being a clarinetist and being raised in the US means as soon as you can play your instrument, you're shoved into a marching band. So a lot of band music that continued through university. But then when I was older, when I was 13, my parents moved back to Asia. So I did spend some of my formative years in Asia, not really learning Asian music, but surrounded by it. My grandfather was an amateur folk musician, so I have early memories of that. And then a big influence on me was I was a teenager during the 80s, so lots of 80s pop music. I wasn't, when we moved to Taiwan, we didn't have a piano anymore, so I didn't do any more piano lessons, no classical training. It was just pop music, so I did have a keyboard and I was in a pop band. So that's also, all these things that stew around. So for me, when I went to university and I went for business and I just stumbled upon a music class by accident and eventually became a composition major, but I was really quite far behind. I didn't have what I felt was behind. I finished my piano training when I was 13 pretty much, and I didn't ever hear any, classical music until I actually went to university. So I was, really try to focus and listen to what my teacher said I should be listening to, write the music that my teacher said I'd be writing. So everything that came with me to that point got dumped, shoved, because we were supposed to write like Berio, or we were supposed to listen to Stockhausen, or we're, Schoenberg, and you think of all these modernist composers that were really held up on a pedestal, 70s, 80s, 90s. So Um, at some point, that didn't sit right with me because I was a Chinese American female and not a European male. And at one point, I really felt like, okay, this is not at all what language I should be writing. For me, at least, and I think it was partly because I was from an immigrant family. I did grow up half, in Asia, half in the U.S. That I didn't have this really very secure sense of self, because when I was in the US, I was the outsider, and I go to Asia, I'm the outsider. So I think that searching for identity inevitably spilled over to myself as a composer. What music am I supposed to be writing? I think if I had been more secure growing up in the US, maybe I would have 100% just embraced my primarily Western training without a doubt. But because of this kind of mixed identity, even beyond music, I think that really inspired me or really drove me to explore more in music. So, and I don't know why it took me so long, but I did spend a semester abroad in China when I was a master's student because I wanted to make those connections and find out how, all other aspects of my life, I feel like I have this fairly good balance between the East and the West, but my music was all West. So I went seeking for other input. And then for my doctorate, my minor, which was self-constructed, was in contemporary Chinese music, where I was specifically studying contemporary Chinese composers and how they integrated materials. But all of that exploration just led me to understand that I cannot just study Chinese music when I'm in grad school. The fact is, my voice is very Western. My ears are very Western. All of that was very apparent to me simply because that was my training and that's how I grew up. And even though I was physically in Asia, my ears were still that of a Westerner. So I had to really kind of come to figure out what all this meant. And eventually it meant, and I'll play you some music later. We'll talk about stuff first, but eventually it meant I had to go through this period of time as a composer where I had to find my own folk music. And that's really how I think of it, is because I don't, I learned Yankee Doodle Dandy and all these American folk songs growing up, but that was just, clearly just taking on whatever was given to me. When I went home, it was a complete, like, parents are Yankee Doodle what, like it was very mismatched between my life at home and my life in school. I think a lot of immigrants experience this. And of course, in Asia, I didn't grow up learning Chinese music and studying the music of the contemporary Chinese composers like Chen Yi, Zhou Long, and even speaking to them. There's no way I can ever replicate or even attempt to understand Chinese music the way that someone would have they grown up in the environment, learned it side by side with Westerns since they were young. So yes, I had to find my own folk music, which is really how I consider it. And that's, I think, something that every individual can think of, because of course, we're all the sum of what we specifically have experienced. So for me, it would be all of those things. It would be, classical romantic music was a huge, huge early influence because of the music I was actually surrounded with, just with my sisters playing violin, piano, the stuff I learned so classical. But yes, the 80s pop, and yes, the marching band, and yes, Ligeti, and yes, whatever. And it was, how do I put all these together into a soup? And I think things are actually quite different now, at least the way that I teach composition and the way that I understand how other people teach composition. But surely at UBC, we do not come in and say, put a certain music on a pedestal and say, this is what we're aspiring to do. And I think there are certain freedoms, and there's more a different kind of exploration that's happening in this generation. So I think it's very, hopefully, I'm hoping that is the experience of most. But I had to spend a number of years undoing this idea that this music is up on the pedestal and what your music should sound like. So yeah, later I'll play you a movement of a piece where I finally think I was able to embrace all of these influences that I was instructed to shove away. I'm thinking, I did this workshop for Soundstreams Toronto a number of years ago, and there was a young woman there who was coming from the UK. And she was saying kind of proudly, oh, melody was stamped out of me in my first year. And I thought, what? Like, melody was stamped out of you. What kind of a teacher is telling their students to not write melody? It just, there are only so many different aspects there are of music: melody, harmony, texture, timbre. If you're going to just completely obliterate a huge, category of melody. So that was something very strange. So I guess, yes, in some areas, music is still being taught that way. You're still being taught, yes, this, no, that. So when I was learning, I was taught, it's not like anybody said no to Chinese music, no to pop music, no to this, that, and the other, but it was more the music that was placed in front of me and the music that we were asked to study and asked to learn that I didn't see any of that in there. So you just kind of figure, well, this is not what I should be writing. So I suppose that would be my first thing. Like, I do think it's very valuable for everyone to think about those, not just earliest, but most impactful. Like, what music really resonated with you at a certain point or still does, because that's still a part of you. And I really believe that part of finding your own voice is not feeling like you have to edit out any part of you. And in fact, even more interesting if you can find a way to bring it all together, because there's nobody in the world who has experienced what you have experienced as a musician, as a person. So part of that idea of authentic voice, this has nothing to do with originality or making sure you stand out from the crowd. It's really more like, what do you have to say as a musician, and making sure that if you choose to edit out something, it is your choice. And because, for instance, not all of my pieces explore East and West. I kind of did it for a few pieces and then said, okay, fine, happy with that. Next piece, don't need to do that, right? But just realizing that, it's all fair game, and sometimes very, very interesting for you to mine those, mine the noise of the tractor and mine, whatever you feel is still in there. Just self-reflection. Have you suppressed something, in a way that is actually detrimental to your writing? Or maybe it doesn't have to be that negative. It's like, can you bring something to life that would be, shading your music in an interesting way? And I find, yes, the past, our childhood memories, experiences, are all really interesting places where we can just look and see, well, what is there? So as an educator, I find, some students write really well, but I'm not finding that, the person behind the music, right? And I think only when you look at these specifics that you have to offer, can you build this language that really represents you. And actually, I'm trying to open my whiteboard right now, because I'm going to back up and share screen. Okay. So this is just a triangle. Let me see. How do I put a triangle on? I did this earlier. No. And just right here. No, yeah, and I'm not sure why I can't write on here.
Okay. Should be able to.
Anyone write on here? I'm not even seeing the pencil thing show up.
Oh, here's a pen. Let's see.
Where'd you find your pen?
Oh, there we go. Just off to the left. I'm sorry, I can erase that. That's terrible. That's,
Left. I'm not sure I have that, but I should have the ability, right?
I clicked on a little yeah, it was a few options. Let's see.
Yeah, the little usually I have this thing that pops up that allows me to choose my tool.
Hmm. Um, let's see. See, I mean, I think I have that on this side, but let me see.
Only
Um,
because I am, maybe there's something you can turn on that says anybody can draw on the board.
I'm just looking. Huh, because as a host, you should be able to do anything. Was my thinking, but
Strange.
you
Okay, it's okay. I can do this on
channel.
Microsoft Word.
Let's just see presentation.
Okay, I'm gonna try it this way. I'm gonna open whiteboard first. Or did that just give me the same thing? See, it looks like the tool should show up right there and then it disappears.
Can anybody else see the tool? No? Okay.
Okay, that's okay. I will go to sharing. It's cooler on the whiteboard, but
Okay, so
yeah.
the message I got was the one that I sent to all of you, and the moment that I began to be active on the screen, it disappeared.
Okay. The
So
owner of the
so
board only allows sharing with users within the same organization. That's really strange. Okay.
and that would be you, yes?
Be me, yeah.
Or is that your whiteboard, Dorothy?
Well, Yana made me host, so I thought it would be my whiteboard, but I don't seem to have that ability either. It's okay. I'm gonna share Microsoft Word. Are you all looking at my blank page now? Here? Now, I cannot draw a triangle on here, I don't think. Oh, wait, maybe I can. Okay, I can do this. I can insert a triangle. It's gonna be so disappointing when I finally get the triangle go up and it'll be, oh, that was it. So all this fuss. Come on. Okay, I'll just do that one. Okay, this is just something that I've cobbled together over the years. It is just a way of looking at composition, and I usually use this with my students, but I find that it does really apply at any point of writing, I feel, anyways. And I'm not going to be able to do this very prettily, but we'll try our best. So I kind of think of the 3 points of the triangle as like different aspects of composing. So one point of the triangle would be technique. Let me move it over here. Because I think as a composer, number one, you're going to need technique. So this kind of backing up before you even talk about authentic voice, you do need technique. And then on the other side here, which it may or may not allow me to enter, would be originality, which is very subjective and can be read in different ways. And on this side, I would say musicality. So when I kind of look at, I mean, primarily in my own work, but I think especially when composers are reflecting on their own work, I would always have them consider this kind of 3 points of the triangle, because I feel that if you only have 2 of the 3, you can have a good piece, but something's missing. So for instance, if we have something that's technically very well crafted and put together and also very musical, but doesn't have originality, this is what I would say is if a student's writing in the style of Mozart. and writing beautiful counterpoint and beautiful harmonic control and voice leading and whatnot. Fantastic technique. The musicality, phrases flow, everything is great. But originality, that could be written by one of 1,000 people. So in that case, it's good for an etude perhaps, or it's good for exploring a certain technique, but not really giving you everything you want as a composer. Or you see pieces that are very original, a very, unusual idea, that have not really seen anyone approach a piece in this way. And it could be quite musical, and that interesting, appealing, good to listen to, but the technique fails. So in this case, it would be maybe the form doesn't make any sense, or even worse, it's a piece that works on paper, but you put it in front of a performer and no, you can't actually play those notes on the violin, or, no, you cannot play a triad on the flute. So the technique, I would lump under technique also your notation and your presentation, because if you can't communicate that idea, then it's also not serving you as a composer. If we take two other legs, let's say you have really strong technique and it's really original. Okay, for this, I would say I've seen works, say somebody who has constructed this very elaborate, let's say musical language, and well, let's say 12 tone rows, and they can analyze every moment of it, and it might be quite original because maybe they're using things in different ways. But when you listen to the piece, there's nothing really that appeals on that to the listener on that particular level. In that case, I think, again, perhaps good for an etude to see how you can work your materials, but ultimately, if it's lacking that last bit of the triangle, still not going to be entirely successful. And I think you find works out there that have succeeded on all of these levels. I think if you look at a lot of the experimental works that were being done mid-century, I find there's a lot of technique and originality. Would I really want to listen to a lot of it? In terms of musicality, of course, that's very subjective. All of this is subjective. Still something worth considering. You can, if I look at this, technique, I think number one as composers, you have to develop technique, and you have to put as many tools as possible in your toolbox. And that means exploring forms, exploring portraits to language, exploring texture, timbre, things that make you really uncomfortable, things that push you outside the box, your own box, whatever that may be, just so you can consciously make a decision to do something or not to do something. What I don't like hearing sometimes is people saying, well, I didn't do that because Sibelius won't notate it well. It's like, no, that's driven entirely backwards. Or they'll say, or just be limited by their technique. So I think it's definitely worth exploring technique. So it's not a limitation, it's a strength. And then originality, again, very subjective. And I would say for originality, it's all to each their own. This is really something where you have to look inward and not worry about writing the most groundbreaking piece in the universe, because I think everybody would be paralyzed and write nothing if put under that kind of pressure. So originality is really what is new for you, because everybody is in a different place. And even as you develop as a composer, what's original for me now is quite different than what was original for me 10 years ago, and so on and so forth. So originality is really something just to consider. And again, all I can say is make sure you're pushing yourself outside the box, whatever your box is. And this is not meant to give you this kind of external pressure that you need to change the musical world with what you do. This is really just making sure that as a composer, you continue to grow. So technique and originality can really support each other, or maybe it's just one side. Technique can really support originality. And musicality, I would say, is the one thing that cannot be coached or taught. This is innate. So presumably you're all composers because you have this, you have some kind of musicality within you, although, I would say there are people who can get by on really strong technique, really strong originality, and maybe the musicality is not always at important if the other two are so striking that it really is a grand statement. And this all just depends on what you want to say as a composer. But again, musicality, I'm a very intuitive composer. So I cannot set up systems and then generate the music and then feel that it actually works. Oftentimes I have to sing through something, or I have to feel through it, or I have to sketch, usually through scribbles and images, just to get the musicality of it. So this, again, I don't feel it can be taught. I think it can be coached, and I think it can be discovered, but each individual's musicality is something quite unique. It's just it's what you personally can bring to this triangle. So this is just kind of a, I don't know, a visual for maybe what the big elements are when you're thinking of composing. And again, this is not what I think of at all when I sit down to write a piece. It's more reflecting on maybe composition in a kind of like on a wider scale, a more abstract view of composition, and not at all anything that you should be grappling with when you're actually sitting down to generate. I think this is more like game plan, I suppose. Great, so that's just my ideas on that. Before we go on, are there any comments? Anyone want to jump in, ask questions, anything? It's kind of like the world as I see it as a composer. Okay. So that's all nice and fine as a composer. I guess I wanted to put one more thing out there, which is the external pressures. And I think what I want to talk about for external pressures, just really what you see as barriers. So I guess for that, think about where you want to be as a composer. You know, give yourself a timeline, whatever that may be. And where you want to be encompasses both the type of music you're writing, who you're writing for, meaning ensembles, the types of collaborations you're doing. You know, and if you're early on enough and everything's still up in the air, just kind of dream, you know, and say, okay, what are those goals? But it would be good as a composer to have those goals. It's always nice to have a long off dream, you know, 30, 40 years from now, but also good to have 5-year dream, 10-year dream. And again, I'm not talking about business plan, anything like that. Just think about what your goals are. But then the second important thing is, what do you find are the barriers? Because that's different for every person, usually kind of similar, but in trying to match up the two, like I know what I would say to both of those questions, and this is something that I still go through this exercise annually, pretty much. Like you finish a commission, you think, well, not, you have to reset. So I'd be curious to know, where are you trying to go for now, and what are your barriers? Snow, do you want to answer that? You don't have to answer, you can just pass if you don't want to, but.
Maybe pass first.
Okay. Clayson?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky question. But I guess like for me, it's trying to think of like this sort of commission composer model of like what is a piece and how much can a piece hold are like some of the questions that I sometimes grapple with. So like when I think about like in my head, I guess there are types of ensembles you want to one day be able to write for and like spaces you want to sort of enter. But it's also like, I guess the question is like, how much can you keep pushing that and move away from this idea of like, okay, here's this piano trio commission, and then here are like the conventions of what that is, and write that piece and then give it over kind of thing. And how does that sort of model of writing music, can that be more expansive? I guess. And I think some of the barriers of it are like some of the things that you've expressed, Dorothy, really well, I think is also like, because that's often a question, like the why of it all, and like how do I try to bring more of myself? And sometimes I wonder, is that even just more of an egotistical question to ask at all? Because sometimes that can get in the way and get away from the act of like actually doing the writing. So there is sort of this wrestling push and pull between those two goals that I have. And I imagine it's not unique to me either. Um, but like sometimes whenever there's a new piece, like a good piece of advice I got before was that you don't have to save the world with your piece, whatever you're writing. But sometimes there's sort of that pressure that, this thing that you're putting on the empty page has to stand for like everything you believe in on all levels, musical or non-musical, and sometimes that big picture level can get in the way of actually getting notes on a page. Um, yeah, I guess those are some of the thoughts that are coming to my head right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can just talk about that a bit before we go on. So my computer did freeze, so I hope I didn't lose too much of what you said. Um, but yes, I think as composers, it's a tricky balance, right? Because we do want to be thinking of those big picture, you know, things like the triangle or whatnot, or this whole thing about authentic voice. But yes, if you think too hard about it, if you then it is that pressure to write the perfect piece, and it is also that pressure that every piece you write needs to be this grand statement, which entirely is not true, right? Um, so I guess even just to address that part of it, I kind of find you have to divorce the two somehow. Like,
Mhm.
um, if you take 10 steps back from your output, then maybe that is a good place to look at, who you are as a composer, authentic voice, that kind of thing. And maybe even as you're in that dreaming stage of, initially approaching the piece and thinking like, what can this piece be? Some of that can influence just what you're trying to do with the piece. But ultimately, when you hit on that aha, you know, idea or snippet or whatever hits you first when you're writing the piece, you kind of have to let all that other noise go. Otherwise, again, like I said, no one's ever going to write anything, right? Because
Yeah.
this is too much pressure.
Yeah.
Like nothing's ever good enough. So, I do find it helps to just do etudes, just to get some things out of the way because then it's out of your system and you've tried things, but there's no pressure. And the other thing that I suggest a lot is this sketching. Like I encourage all composers to work away from the piano, away from your computer, away from staff paper. Work with blank paper or just go for
Mhm.
a walk. Work with your head, because that is where the music is the most free. The reason why I say blank paper, because then you can actually put down some representation of what you're hearing or what you're exploring. But the whole idea is to take that pressure off. It's terrible if you
Did Dorothy freeze for everyone else as well? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Hopefully she'll be
Yeah.
back.
timeline.
Oh, there you go.
Automatically control cough. Automatically it's 4/4. Or people who try more orchestral music that way. Oh my goodness, all those spaces to fill in. Like what? Music is not filling in, right? Music is sculpture. You're building, right? You're building and growing. So the best way to start is from nothing. And that's the only way that it can grow in any direction, in any form. So that's why I say best thing is up here because there's nothing in there. No, I had to go there. No, but best thing is here because there's nothing preformed, right? And second best would be a blank piece of paper because there's nothing. Like, especially for those of you who are doing graphic notation or, not doing notated music at all, it obviously makes no sense to start in Sibelius, but even, how do you come at those ideas? So what I really love about this though is you can form music very quickly and then throw it away if it didn't quite work. Whereas if you do that on the computer, you're like, oh, I can't throw away 17 measures. It took me 2 hours. But this way I feel like, it's so free to compose with nothing. Um, and the paper really is just to help you to capture it so you don't forget what it is. But um, what even was my point here? Oh, this idea of sculpture that you're kind of building. I mean, I do like using the analogy of sculpture because for composing, I feel that's a good way to go. That you have this sense of the overall, you know, work before you start. Like if you're starting a novel, you do not say, I'm going to start with the first word and I'm going to write it all the way to the end. Okay, that's not a great way to design a novel, or a painting. The artist does not start a painting and say, well, I don't really know what I'm painting, but I'm just going to start putting some lines in the corner, or if you're going to draw, even if you know a woman, you probably will not start with every detail of her ear, and then slowly fill in the rest of it. And the same thing I feel for composing is, from out to in, actually, I have to cheat. Two ways. I do think it's good to know what the overall idea is, but I do think you have to start with some kind of actual musical substance. Because again, you can generate this huge, great structure and form and plan, but if you don't actually hear the music that belongs with it, good luck. I can't do it because you're just shackled. What kind of music can you possibly conceive of that'll fit into this predetermined form? So I always find that whatever your seed is, whatever comes first, it could be a melody, it could be a harmony, it could be a texture, it could be a moment, whatever that is your seed. And it would be good to grow it a little bit, like whatever you feel is a good enough but flexible chunk of music, and then stand back. Now that you have something concrete, now you dream, now you go for your walk, because you have that little bit that's quite concrete. And before you commit to anything, I find like at the beginning of composing, everything is a proposal. Nothing should be set in stone other than what must be set in stone. And that's what I mean is that first little bit of inspiration, whatever that will be. And from there, I would just dream. Sometimes I would say, do like 20 different versions of, what the form might be, or 20 different versions of what this piece is going to say, just so you're making yourself explore many different options and not just settling on the first thing that comes to you. And I know that if you try to do 20, by the time you reach 8 or maybe even 6, you're going to start repeating yourself, and then somewhere in the midst of all of that, you're finding the true essence of what this piece wants to be. So it's kind of a nice exercise to go through. I really recommend do not commit. Like when you're writing a piece, don't commit. And that's where the pressure starts to ease. You're only going to commit after you've done all this other stuff, but you can't do this other stuff if you're sitting in front of a computer looking at a computer program. You have to go away, and just let things percolate and grow. And, I find going for a walk, like going to the bus stop, washing dishes, anytime you can put your mind toward your piece, but your body is doing something else, I find those the most fruitful composing sessions. The worst kind is not having those ideas and then sitting down to do work. I think there's something about physical motion in the body that does, I believe, frees the mind up to explore these things. Once you think you have something to work with, then I would go sit down, and go. So sometimes I would even like record things on my iPhone or just sketch little doodles, on whatever I might have. Yeah. So I don't know if that helps at all, but I would say part of that pressure of starting the piece, take it off by changing your process. Don't, you found a little magical something, don't be in such a rush to make it do something. Just take a week, take 2 weeks, take 3 weeks, however much of time you have for that luxury to just do proposals. Everything's a proposal, and you should be dumping out 90% of what you turn out in those opening days, those opening, weeks, whatever, with that material. And only when you know your way forward, you can see the whole sculpture. You don't know the detail yet, you only know these little bits, then you can move forward. And what's really great too is if you kind of have a sense of what this piece is going to grow into, you can jump around, because you already see how the whole thing is going to fit together. So when reality strikes and you start to write it and the piece says, nope, not going to do it, then you have to readjust. But I would say at any point when you kind of stray away from what you initially thought you were going to do the same process all over again. Okay, now with my new reality, I back off and I'm going to see how do I get it to work given this new reality. Now that my former plan doesn't really make any sense, now that this bit of music is kind of taking a life on its own, I would still say back up, get control, like, and by control, it's so loose. It's just, have that game plan and then you go forward again. At some point that game plan will lock into place, but it could be, when you're 80% through the piece and you realize, oh, the ending actually has to blah, 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 and then rework. So yeah, I think a lot of the pressure we feel for pieces to be this, that, and the other is maybe just we're trying to know it's everything too early. And I think if you just allow that process, you know, to let it be 20, 30 different things, then you feel more at peace, I think, when you begin, or not even at peace, probably the opposite peace. Then you're excited, like you need that aha moment with your form. You need your aha moment with how the piece is gonna grow. If you have strong material, don't rush, just live with it. And then, yeah. So hopefully that translates into, like you were saying, like a piano trio, and can't remember exactly what your point was, but like at what point, how far can you stretch it? You were saying?
Yeah,
Kalesa?
yeah, exactly. Like, and I think first of all, yeah, thank you, because everything you're speaking about is exactly that. It's like also all the steps to, I think, demystifying the process of any of it, and also acknowledging that there's like all the sort of things you do in idea generation to get to that threshold point where then you're like just flowing. Like I think that's like every piece feels like, all right, just keep pushing what you're doing to get to that point, and then it starts, you hit the sort of momentum through all of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, to the other point, yeah, it's that like for me, like even when you were talking about what kinds of types of music or like kinds of ensembles do you want to work with? Like to me, like the idea of operas, which is not something I've done, but like seems really exciting because you get to play with so many tools in the box, and that seems like a dream place to eventually get to of some sort. But like that sort of mentality about again, different tools to play with, how can you apply that even in something like a piano trio? So like those kind of questions, and I guess that's what I meant by like what does pushing a form or whether it's a musical form or whether it's the ensemble or what you're writing for can be. And I don't mean pushing in a like I think your triangle model is great. Like I don't mean pushing in like always radically seeking innovative music. Like I don't think that's always a healthy motivation to write either. Um, but like in the sense like I think it's doing it from an angle of like what you're talking about, honesty, and like the things that you get excited about and got excited about as a kid and got excited about even outside a concert music space. How can you bring just a little bit of all those little seeds into even something that's like this one-off commission for whatever, like can be like basically in everything you're asked to write, right? How do you bring that same spirit to it, I guess, is sort of the question of it.
And I think it's great if you're able to actually collaborate. You know, for me as a composer,
Yeah. Yeah.
types of commissions that I really don't enjoy are those where I write a piece and I hand it off. And honestly, most orchestral commissions are like that.
Yeah.
Like the orchestra didn't commission it, the conductor didn't want it, the audience doesn't want it, so why am I writing this? So in some ways, I really, chamber music is where it's at for me because you can work with them as individuals. So presumably, if they've asked you for a piece, they'd be open to that kind of thing, in which case I would just work with them and see, bring your ideas. I would not feel like, oh, I must write a piece for these people and their audience. They commissioned you because you're you. So even if they don't know all of you, you can bring them aside. Yeah, that, just have that trust. I mean, maybe it won't play out, but I would hope that people are generally looking to work with a composer for certain reasons, and even if you bring something new, it could be something that they really grab onto. But yeah, but then it is a collaboration, because if you sense that kind of pushback, then it's up to you to to find a way where you can bring something. I mean, to me, it's like problem
Hmm.
solving, right? Actually, if I go back to the
Yeah.
orchestra model, for me, that's problem solving, because I'm not brave enough as a composer to just write a piece knowing that 2,000 people are going to hate it. Like I can't write that kind of orchestral piece. I'm just too sensitive, you know? So like I've tried to find like, well, how can I write a piece that won't pander and that I still feel like I got something out of writing it, but I know won't send them running for the exit in droves, you know? So for me, it's a different kind of creative challenge. And I think that's the same for every piece I write. Who am I writing for? You know, I guess when you have that luxury of writing for a group and working with them, it's automatically collaboration. And that means you're not writing in a vacuum. You're writing, taking into account what they like, what they want to do, but you're not just removing yourself from it. It's more like, okay, given this amazing opportunity, what can I bring that'll amplify what they can bring, knowing that they will amplify what you can bring, right? That's the collaboration. So I wouldn't go forward and say, oh, one off piano trio, da da da. You know, I would just write what you want to write, you know, but, and this is just me, again, I think other composers might approach in a different way, but also know who you're writing for. You know, they're writing you, they want you specifically, you write for them specifically. So, you know, I've worked with, like, especially with soloists, I'll say, well, what kind of stuff do you want? Like, what kind of piece would you want? Some really don't say anything, you know, like whatever you want to write, which for me is kind of disappointing because that's not a collaboration. That's me just, you know, it's all about me. And like you were saying, should it be all about me? I don't think it should be about me. You know, I think that is the bonus of the collaboration. Is it's about us, you know, so I want that input from the other end. So I
So do
would,
you mind me asking, like, what happens, sorry, like when you get like a soloist or a duo, or any, like the commissioner actually has, like, isn't giving you anything in that sense? Like, where they're like, yeah, just write me anything and I'll play it kind of thing.
I don't like those commissions where they say, write me anything, because then I feel the player's not engaged, you know, like this is their chance. So one person I work with gave me like 2 full pages of, you could do this and you could do that, or you could do that, you could do this. This is good. You know, just like, and I looked, I'm like, whew. So it was a place to start, I'll say, but in the end, I kind of read through, you know, of course, I wasn't going to do all 2 pages of the, you know, ideas, but I did kind of interpret them my own way. You know, like one of them was, oh, it'd be really neat to have canon. Like, I don't want to write a canon, you know, but I did end up writing a movement where the melody kind of twisted back on itself and kind of canonic, and that was fun for me to write. And other, you know, had I not had that input, I probably wouldn't have explored it. So yeah, so I like, again, that aspect, the problem solving aspect. So I would say if you get a commission, you need to be in conversation with them and see. And barring that, if they really don't want to give you anything, or you know, just really want to leave it up to you, maybe ask what else is on the program, and then you can position yourself around those pieces. That also works too. I mean, of course, that only works for the premiere, but then following that, people will build programs around your work because that will be the anchoring piece. And then if that doesn't work, then yeah, just go nuts. Do what you want to write, you know, whatever you want to write. I think we've given you that. Yeah. Lavinia, what thoughts do you have?
Um, I I really love the collaborative process as well. But I find that sometimes commissioners don't always know exactly what they want. Like, I think you should listen to them, and then they've asked you for a reason. So I feel like you can kind of push an idea or something that they maybe wasn't on those 2 pages, and that they'll be like, oh yes, this is why I commissioned you. I don't know. You're talking about your like timeline and goals, and so that's something I've recently thought of a lot. Like before, I kind of thought of myself as a private composer. I've always composed, but I do have had those external barriers. I kind of followed my husband's career. He's a pianist. And at one point, somebody had told him, you know, you're not going to get tenure if you keep playing your wife's pieces. Or you know, I've had some commissions, and then someone I would respect, a professor would come and say to me, like, why is it that women write about these like stories and men write music, or, you know, these little comments. I think uh, they have been barriers for me and they've changed the way that I've written music. And I think we've just returned to Canada in the last 5 years. I think there is a bit of freedom now to think that, yes, this is something I want to explore seriously, but it's like, how do you make those connections, and how do you go further? That's the big that's where I am right now in that kind of timeline. And Rodney has been very supportive with that kind of journey.
Thanks. Rodney, do you want to chime in?
I think really when you're speaking, I'm going back to your triangle and speaking about originality, there's a kind of pressure in music of all sorts to do something new every time. And in the visual arts, people do a series and often stay on the same idea for a long period of time and look at it from different ways. And I think that it's important to remember as a musician that is also a model, and we can go deeper, that it is possible to take the same material and do it again. Of course, there are examples of this in the Baroque from Handel, and examples in Beethoven as well. But the pressure, I would say, recently, and it's in all forms of music, to, you know, as Stephen Sondheim would say, to be new or else you're through, is coupled, you know, there are different aspects of this. At the same time, we are occasionally commissioned because somebody liked something that you did, and they want the same thing. So we do have the pressure from the other side to do the same thing as well, even when it's not appropriate. I suppose those are my two main thoughts on what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I do feel more and more that this pressure to be original is, I mean, it's a real thing, but I feel that there's really room for so much different music in the world that, you know, again, so my own compositional training, if you haven't already gathered, was not traumatic, but very stifling, you know, to write like this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. And I don't see that in the world. I mean, I feel that there are people who are making good careers, not necessarily writing the most original work, but very good work and work that communicates. And there's a place for that, you know. So yes, I think that's why when I put originality at the point of the triangle, I think we have to be clear to say that's for you, you know, so you know that you are not just repeating yourself with every piece. A series being different. I mean, like you look at, you know, the composers who had very clear stages. Ligeti, for instance. You know, there's a time period where he was all about the, you know, the like the metronomes ticking at different speeds, and there are different techniques like the micropolyphony that he explored in a certain time, and then he moved on, right? Like Stravinsky as well, or Penderecki. Look at all these composers and their works you can lump together based on what they're exploring and the techniques and even the aesthetic, the language. So for that, I think, I mean, those particular composers I named happen to be, you know, original on like with a capital O, right? Whereas for us, I mean, I think for the individual composer, just cannot think about that. I don't think anybody can write with being original for the universe as your primary concern, because how do we even do that? I can't, there's no way I could do that, because immediately every idea I have, I would just edit out and say, no, that's been done and that's been done. So it's really more like, what have you done? You know, when I'm at my most critical, I will lament to my husband, who's a contemporary music flautist. I'll say, I'm a one trick pony. This is my thing. because I feel like, oh, I've done this before, or I'll find the solution to an ending and realize I've already done it in two other pieces, and then it's very frustrating. So I think as a composer, it's good to see, okay, are you a one-trick pony? Like, is your form always ABA? Or are you always starting quietly? Or do you always use the same kind of pitch collection, and then push beyond it? So I think that's really, as far as originality goes, that's where you should be looking at. That's your measuring stick, not will I make a difference in the universe? Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but I don't think anybody should set out with that kind of pressure on their shoulders. And yeah, and whether you write a piece that's kind of similar to something you've written before, because that's what the commissioner wants, or if you write a piece that really pushes you, it's fine. I don't think, we're gonna value something less. I say maybe the exception being if you pretty much just wrote the same piece, but just, I think, again, it would be problem solving. It'll say, okay, well, commissioner likes piece A, so how do I make them a piece that has those elements of piece A, and yet I do something? So I know for me, I wasn't just, doubling back on something that I'd done 5 years ago. I know for me, I put in something new. And I think that's enough. I think that is growth as a composer, and then you'll have those pieces where you just completely pull the rug out from underneath yourself and say, I'm going to do something that has as little connection to what I've done before, as possible. That's also a fun kind of a challenge. So I think, yeah, it does really depend on the project at hand, who you're working with, maybe your own, your own state of mind or whatever is happening in your life at that point. All of that does very strongly affect who we are as composers and what we do.
And if you do have an idea which is new and you recognize it as new, overcome the fear that you have written something new, that that there must be a reason that no one has done this before.
Mm-hmm.
Also, to trust, have confidence in your material, to go forward and do something that's not only new for you but new for music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right.
Thank you
Congrats.
so much. That was just a fantastic, so many beautiful insights and truths shared. Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you, Rodney. Thank you, everyone, for participating. We're at our 75 minutes, so I just want to be respectful of Dorothy's time. And thank you so much for this wonderful session. We could go on and on. And thank you for creating this wonderful space to kind of unpack some of these problems and challenges and well, this kind of this wonderful journey that we're all on as creators in different ways. I know for myself, I found it so many things that I can apply to my work, and I just feel like it's such an honor to work with composers and to be entrusted with bringing these things to life. So just wonderful insights into the process. It's I really want to personally thank all of you for taking part. Is there anything else you just wanted to leave us with, Dorothy or Rodney, as we go about the rest of our day and our week?
I mean, I just want to go back because I didn't really address what Lavinia said about, how do you make those connections? And I gather, Rodney, I'm sure you've given her some good pointers and things, but, it's really just about two things, right? Connections and getting your music out there. I mean, when it all boils down to that, I think the connections are really important, in person, that is, because when groups want to commission, the first place they look is who's around us. Right, so just being sure, and I'm sure you are, as active and connected as you can be with your community or whatever community you can, be there in person if you have to expand out. And the other is, find every opportunity for getting your music out there. I don't know if there are call for scores or competitions, but it's, even if the piece doesn't win or whatnot, it's introduced to whoever's sitting on the panel. Every time you apply for a grant, every time, the great thing about being composers is our music can go and speak on our behalf. So I feel that, go back to the triangle. If you have good technique, if you present yourself well, if you have something strong to say, not necessarily original for the universe, but I think the music will be your advocate, right? And people do collect these, right? I think anyone who's ever sat on a jury, even the ones that don't win, you're kind of collecting in your head, that was a really interesting voice, or I really like that part of the piece, too bad the ending didn't work at all, so it couldn't win. But you collect, these voices, and I think that anywhere you can send your music to do that, know that that's going on as a process, and it might come back to you, who knows, in 2 3 years, someone will need to commission, they remember your piece from something or some time. So it is a really slow process. And then, of course, the third thing would make sure you have your presence online, a good website with your recordings and scores, so people who want to find you can actually find you and find your music and can reach out to you. But it's really just working on those three things, I suppose: the personal connections, you're going to concerts, making sure you go talk to people afterward, sending your music out there, making sure people can find you, so it's not always just you going that way, they come find you. I don't know, Rodney, anything you want to add to those three main pillars?
Mark McGregor is going to give a presentation about it.
Perfect. Yes. So
And
I
he's
can-
better at it. He's better at it than most.
he is very good at that. Yeah. But I would say that's a good start.
I can second the website thing, because as soon as I hear something interesting or come across a new composer, I Google them, see what I can find out, see if it can fit into my ensemble, what I'm programming. If even if it's a MIDI mock-up, so I can have an idea of, what the harmonic language and just a style of it, like that's even just a minimal website with MIDIs, that's helpful for me as a programmer.
And CMC as well, I think, especially if people want to do searches. So let's program, women from this part of the country, we can do that kind of a search. And yeah, I do think, I mean, I hope, but I do think that many ensembles will go there when they're looking for, perhaps to, for specific types of programming, and just to see who's out there. So.
Yeah. Our next presentation is on CMC and what it can do for you and how you can apply. So that's a perfect segue into our next session, and a nice plug for CMC.
And Cameron, CMC means Canadian Music Center, like Joseph, whom you met.
Great.
Well, thank you everyone for contributing. Great conversation. Nice to meet all of you. And concerts when?
Is June 20th in Vancouver sorry, this is my cat is constantly in the way. The Orpheum Annex in Vancouver. We will be featuring our 3 current Composer Inc. fellows and their newly minted works, as well as 3 of our previous composer incubator fellows. So that will be a really thrilling concert, and featuring the Allegra composer ensemble. And yeah, I'll be in touch with the fellows about a few more, and the mentors about a few more details, now that we have them hammered down for that whole week that's leading up to the concert, and the live workshops, and some other opportunities that we're creating around that week for you if you're able to join us live. It'd be amazing. Awesome. And as mentioned, our May session will be with Sean Bickerton from CMC. I'll send out a reminder email and the link and everything, and hope you can join us for all of that. And once again, thank you so much to Dorothy Chang for an amazing presentation today, and facilitating these great conversations. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you all. Nice chatting.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Dorothy. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Till next time.